Pam Bondi thought she was walking into a routine session. What she didn't know was that Jasmine Crockett had the emails, the timestamps, the signed letters, and a plan to bring every contradiction into the light in front of the nation. It was supposed to be just another oversight session. No chaos, no fireworks, just suits, microphones, and the usual scripted dance of testimony. But the mood inside the hearing room on Capitol Hill that Tuesday morning didn't feel ordinary. Jasmine Crockett sat quietly at the end of the committee table, posture still, eyes fixed, pen in hand. She didn't flip through her notes like the others. She didn't sip coffee. She just watched former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi was seated 2 rows down, testifying under oath. Her voice was steady. She'd been here before. She knew how to handle pressure, or at least she thought she did. I've had no direct communication with Westbridge Strategies or its affiliates in the last 12 months, Bondi said, eyes calmly scanning the faces in front of her. A few heads nodded. The chairman scribbled something on a yellow notepad. One representative whispered to another. The kind of movements you'd expect when people thought the hearing was on autopilot. But not Jasmine. She blinked, slowly, like she was counting in her head. 5 seconds passed, then 10. She leaned into her mic. Miss Bondi, Jasmine began, voice low, but direct. Could you repeat that last statement for the record? Pam turned slightly toward her, wearing the kind of polite smile people reserve for kids asking too many questions. Certainly, she said, repeating her denial word for word. Jasmine clicked her pen once, then she said nothing, just stared at her for a beat too long. Pam shifted, a subtle change, but anyone watching closely could feel it. Her body adjusted in the chair. She lifted her chin as if she suddenly needed air. That's when the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The clerk at the side table coughed. One of the press photographers adjusted their lens. It wasn't loud, but the atmosphere had changed. Like something had been let in and no one quite knew what to do with it. Yet Jasmine's voice cut through again, firmer this time. You're aware that Westbridge Strategies is currently under federal investigation for illegal lobbying tied to the Ellington environmental contract in Oregon. Pam hesitated, then nodded. Once I've read the reports, yes, and you're sure, Jasmine continued, her tone neutral but pressing, that you haven't communicated with anyone from that firm, email, phone, in person since last October? Pam crossed her legs, slowly adjusting her suit jacket. That's correct. Another pause. Jasmine glanced briefly down at the folder in front of her. It was slim, almost unimpressive in size, just a manila folder. With a single blue post-it stuck to the edge. No theatrics, no flourish. She opened it. What happened next wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with gasps or shouting. It came quietly in Jasmine's voice as she read out loud. March 18th, 9:47. I am high. Pam just looping back with the revised talking points. Let us know if you're still comfortable pushing this at your Thursday appearance. Jeff, Westbridge Strategies. Pam's lips parted slightly. Her jaw stiffened, but she didn't speak. Jasmine looked up. Do you recognize this email? No answer. The room had shifted again. No one was flipping through papers anymore. Staffers stared, cameras locked on. Jasmine held up a printout for the record. There's more, but before I continue, do you still stand by your sworn testimony that you've had no contact with this firm? Silence. Pam opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She glanced at the chairman as if hoping for a lifeline. There wasn't one. I'd need to check my records, she said finally, her voice cracking slightly. Jasmine didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply placed the document face up on the table. The timestamp is from a Westbridge domain. The address is tied directly to Jeff Raoul, lead consultant. You replied 12 minutes later with quote looks. Good, I'll run it by Brian and confirm. Pam looked down at the table. Her fingers curled into her palm. Someone in the back of the room let out a breath. They didn't realize they were holding, but Jasmine wasn't finished. The room was only beginning to understand what was coming next. Pam tried to recover. She cleared her throat, adjusted the mic, and offered the kind of answer politicians lean on when they're cornered. Representative Crockett, I received dozens of emails each day, many from unsolicited sources. It's entirely possible that something was sent without my acknowledgement or review. I'd have to see the full thread to understand the context. That's when Jasmine tilted her head slightly and gave the faintest nod, not of agreement, but of recognition. She had heard this kind of dance before. She leaned back just a little, folding her hands. Context is important, Jasmine replied coolly. So, let's make sure we get all of it. Pam gave a short laugh, the kind that isn't really about humor. A smirk crept in a flicker of that old confidence. I mean, respectfully representative. This feels more like a cross-examination than an oversight hearing. A few soft chuckles fluttered from the gallery. Jasmine didn't flinch respectfully. Miss Bondi, she said, when someone gives sworn testimony before a congressional committee, and that testimony doesn't match documented communication, that's not a feeling, that's a problem. Pam's expression tightened. The smirk vanished. Jasmine reached for the second document there. Nails tapped lightly against the tabletop as she held it up. April 6th subject line, urgent coordination. Governor's office talking points. Sender Westbridge CC'd to you and 2 staff members from your private consulting firm. Care to explain what kind of coordination that was? Pam opened her mouth to speak, but Jasmine continued without giving her the space. You replied with a PDF and attachment, and the metadata confirms your device sent it. The committee room shifted again. Eyes widened. Let me be clear, Jasmine said. This isn't about your memory. This is about accountability. You sat in that chair and denied contact. Now we have timestamps, IP logs, and chain correspondence showing not just contact in just 3 minutes. J.D. Vance slammed his fist, leaned into the mic, and snarled. Maybe you should get out of America. The room didn't gasp. It cracked. Jasmine Crockett rose like a storm, dressed in silence. She didn't shout, she detonated. What truth did she unleash that made a U.S. senator wish the cameras had never been rolling? The red tally light blinked once, then locked into a cold, unblinking stare. Live, unfiltered, unforgiving. Room 214 of the Capitol Oversight Committee was no longer just a hearing room. It was a battleground disguised in mahogany and microphones. The American flag hung stiff behind the panel like a prop waiting for its cue, and every news camera panned with predator stillness, waiting for the kill. Shot. At the center sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Her navy blue suit was tailored to precision, but it wasn't fashion. It was armor. Her expression unreadable. Not cold, not warm, just composed. The kind of stillness that warned you a storm wasn't coming. It had already arrived and you hadn't noticed. She adjusted the mic, cleared her throat once. No papers shuffled. No pens clicked. Only her voice broke the silence. Mr. Chairman, she began evenly. We are here today to discuss the systematic expulsion of military veterans men who put their lives on the line for a country that now pretends they're disposable. Pause. 3 of them deported this month. 1 served 2 tours in Afghanistan. 1 was awarded a Bronze Star. All 3 now live in exile because their paperwork didn't match the blood they spilled. J.D. Vance shifted in his chair. His lips twitched. He was waiting. Jasmine's voice didn't shake. When we say thank you for your service, what we really mean is, until you inconvenience us, and for these veterans, Latino, Black, Haitian, the price of serving is to be forgotten. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The press gallery leaned in. Jasmine continued, calm and deliberate, like someone placing dynamite stick by stick on the floor of polite politics. The hypocrisy isn't just shameful, she said. It's policy. Then came the moment, the snap. J.D. Vance leaned into his mic, cutting her off mid-sentence. You're always tearing this country down, Congresswoman, he said, tone already edged with contempt. Always dividing people, always painting America as the villain. Jasmine stopped. Her eyes met this, but her face gave nothing away. J.D. raised his voice. His words grew sharper. If you hate this country so much. He paused just enough to make it sting, then maybe you should get out. Silence. No one moved, not even the guards. It didn't feel like a gaffe. It felt like a detonation. Deliberate, measured, meant to wound. Somewhere in the back of the room, a camera light flickered like a fuse. A woman in the gallery gasped aloud. A staffer dropped their pen. The chairman blinked. Senator, let's maintain decorum, please. But it was too late. The phrase had already left his lips, already clipped into headlines, already screamed across screens. Jasmine didn't move for 3 full seconds. She stared straight ahead, her hands folded lightly on the desk. Then quietly, decisively, she reached for her glass, took a small sip, and placed it down with precision. Then she spoke. "Senator," she began, "I was born in Texas. My grandfather laid railroad tracks for a nation that paid him in insults. My father delivered mail through neighborhoods that posted no colors on their gates. And I'm here elected because the people of my district believe that America doesn't belong to just you." J.D. Vance blinked, his jaw shifted, slightly clenched. But Jasmine wasn't done. "You don't get to define patriotism just because you bought the microphone. And you definitely don't get to tell me to leave a country my ancestors helped build while yours signed deeds to own them." The air split. A low hum swept through the room, half disbelief, half awe. Across the aisle, Representative Ayanna Pressley smiled just barely. Rep. Maxwell Frost raised his eyebrows and leaned forward. The chairman tried, again. Let's bring this back to policy." But no one was listening. Jasmine stared into the camera now. Not at JD, not at the panel, but into Thellens, into the homes of every American watching. "You want to tell me to leave," she said softly. "Fine, but understand this. Every time someone like me leaves, this country gets a little smaller. And I'm not leaving. I'm staying to make sure you never get the last word again." Phones across the nation lit up. Tweets flew. Hashtags bloomed like wildfire. Crockett stays. She belongs. Get out goes both ways. But the real question, one that burned behind every blinking cursor, every whispered breath across the gallery, was this. What happens when the woman you tried to silence decides she's not going anywhere? The room was still holding its breath. J.D. Vance leaned back in his chair like a man who believed he'd won something. Across the panel, aides pretended to review documents they weren't reading. Behind the cameras, no one blinked. The live feed didn't cut. It zoomed, and Jasmine Crockett didn't move. She sat perfectly still, one hand resting on the table, the other curled loosely at her side. Her eyes weren't fixed on Vance anymore. They had turned inward, somewhere quieter, somewhere colder. She heard again the sound of her father's boots leaving at 4 a.m. postal uniform, crisp spine straighter than most men in Congress. Rain or snow, insult or smile, he carried that mailbag like it was a flag no one could take from him. And still one winter she remembered a man had slammed the door on him and shouted, "You people don't belong here." She had been 9. The memory slid into another, her mother crying softly in the living room, a rejected voter registration letter in her hands. Wrong ID, wrong district, wrong skin. She didn't understand it then, but she does now. Disenfranchisement doesn't need a gun.